Welcome back. We are continuing this hour-long conversation with Caroline Glick. It is a deep dive into the challenges that a nation that I believe most Americans hold as holy and deeply revered, the state of Israel, at a moment when it is being subjected, as Caroline has said, to myriad forces seemingly set on its destruction. That includes, astonishingly, even Democrats in the United States, political forces that have historically benefited tremendously from the support, the financing, the activism of Jews in our country, who purportedly have shared this commitment to the state of Israel. It seems not so much anymore. And Caroline, you were alleging that the party, the left, more generally, I think you said, but I assume this applies pretty much to the Democratic Party as well, is becoming actually anti-Semitic, not just, averse to its historic position on Israel. And I say this as a guy who worked for Scoop Jackson, who has to be spinning at a very high RPM in his grave at what has become of a party because he loved Israel and advanced the common interests of the United States and Israel relentlessly during his time in the United States Senate, particularly.
Yeah, no, he was an amazing friend of the Jewish people and of the Jewish state. And frankly, there are a lot of Democrats in the Congress today who are also pro-Israel and are not anti-Semitic. In fact, I don't think that Nancy Pelosi is an anti-Semite or anti-Israel. I think she's very pro-Israel. Her father certainly was. But the problem is that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, who is in Israel and once referred to himself as the guardian of Israel because his last name Schumer is an Anglified version of Shomer, which means a guardian.
Mhm.
But they're enabling and advancing the most radical members of their party who are anti-Semites, and they're not standing up to them. Neither is Steny Hoyer,
Let
who
me
is
make this
another
clear.
great friend of his.
It's not just that they're not chastising them or calling them out or sanctioning them in
They're
any way.
promoting them.
They're actually supporting and abetting what they're doing.
They're promoting them. I mean, Ilhan Omar got promoted. First, she was given her first term. She was given a plum position on the Foreign Affairs Committee of the House. And in her second term, she's been given the chairmanship of one of the subcommittees in the House Foreign Relations Committee. And this is a woman who is an out and out anti-Semite and terror supporter.
Yeah.
So, and they didn't have
Sharia
to do this.
supremacist, I think,
Right.
is
They didn't have to
apt
do this.
description.
Nancy Pelosi, she has a majority support among Democrats not to advance these kinds of positions, but she's allowing them to run roughshod because that's the deal.
Mm.
Joe
Because
Biden
that's
is,
the deal that suggests that that's where she thinks the base of the party is now. Is that what you mean?
and they're also the ones who were challenging her to remain Speaker of the House. So that she cut a deal with them and
That's
she
the deal.
promotes them. She promotes them, and in exchange, they allowed her to remain speaker. But as speaker, she's completely beholden to them. By the way, the same is true of Joe Biden. Joe Biden made a deal with Bernie Sanders supporters who are anti-Semitic
Mm-hmm.
for their support in the Democratic primary and then in the general election for them all to go out to the polls to vote for him
Yeah.
against Donald Trump, even though they didn't want that.
Yeah.
So these are the
Bringing
ways
in
that
Muslim
they
Brotherhood operatives, I
right,
think, into their government, among other things, to
right,
enforce all of this.
absolutely.
So where we find ourselves then with respect to the U.S. government is that it
So the
is
Biden
actively
administration.
undermining Israel as part of a shared agenda with the EU and the Palestinians and the Israeli
And
left. Does
Iran.
that basically end Iran to boot? And Carolyn, so where does this leave Israel? You've got to, what is the condition of, or the state, I should say, maybe, of the government at the moment? It's a caretaker government, is that right? And
No, it's not a
what care is
caretaker
it
government.
taking?
It's
How would you
it, it's
describe it?
not. It's the government of Israel. It lost its parliamentary majority a couple of weeks ago when one of the members of the breakaway right wing parties said she'd had enough and walked away from the coalition. They had a bare 61 seat majority in Israel's 120 member Knesset, our parliament, and now they are at 60. But there's a second Arab party that's not inside of the government, and they're giving it a life vest
Mm.
so that now they're beholden not only to the Muslim Brotherhood but also to Arab parties that openly support Hezbollah, who and one of the heads of one of the Arab factions in this joint list was also Yasser Arafat's chief advisor for many years. I mean, these people are enemies of Israel,
Yeah.
and
The enemy
and so it's
within
not
the parliament, no
so it's
less.
not clear, but it's not clear how long this government is going to be able to last
Yeah.
because its internal contradictions bring it down literally every single day. And I think that the most widespread view today in Israel is that it's on life support. It can last a week or two or three, but it's coming down. And now the
Mm.
question is whether we're going to be going to new general elections for the Knesset, or whether from among the breakaway right wing parties are going to be able to find their way back into the camp and form a government in the sitting parliament with Benjamin Netanyahu again at the helm. And if that happens, it's not the best outcome. I think the best outcome is general elections to get rid of some of these people, but it certainly would be a lot better than what we have today.
Well, the challenge
And
with these.
hopefully, by the way, it'll happen before Joe Biden comes here, because Joe Biden is expecting to come here later this month, and a visit by him at this time would be good for him politically because it'll be able to take a little bit of the pressure off of him from what he's done to the U.S. economy and other things, and to his incompetent management of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But he but it will be bad for Israel because all of his policies are extremely anti-Israel, including his policies towards Jerusalem, where he still is adamant about opening up a U.S. consulate in Israel, in Jerusalem, in Israel's capital, to the
Yeah.
Palestinians. Um,
Completely
and so we're
undoing,
going to
in
have
other words, what Donald Trump did with his move of
seeking to undermine and
explicitly.
unglue
Yeah.
what Donald Trump did.
Carolyn, we have to pause for one last time. This is a really important moment to take stock of what the U.S. is doing more broadly in the region as well. And I think this trip, I fear that the government will still be in place and it will be party to some very bad decisions and behavior by the Biden team when they're there. But we're going to talk about Iran, especially looming over the horizon, with Caroline Glick right after this.